The biggest tension point is having a family. I got to get up, take the kids to school. I got to put the daughter's 4 years old to bed every night. Got to be present. I got to show up for my students. I got to grade papers. I got to still have my shit together on that end. And then the weekend comes and it's like, okay, my time slot's 3 a.m., 4 a.m. Let me put the baby to bed, then take a nap, and then, and then wake up, go to this thing, do it, come back. They get up the next day, act like nothing ever happened. How was last night? Yeah, it was cool. I got like 4 hours sleep or something like that. And then just go back into this normie life. Or my students are like, how was your weekend? Yeah, it was fine. I don't usually tell them till the end of the semester. And I'm just a professor who's part of another, in their eyes, their kind of parents' world or something. Who knows? And then when they find out, they're like, what? What is this other double life you got going on type thing? Sleep is like the most important thing to manage my energy and to not show up tired for a gig, right? It's the number one. I've noticed in the past, that's when the gig sucked, is if you don't have the energy, right? Even if the tunes are fire, the audience just picks up on that.
The year was 1995. The location was London, England. I was going to school at Imperial College and living in a dumpy 150 square foot studio apartment that had a hot plate, a mini fridge, not much else. There was a 45-minute walk to get to school. The 50 apartments in the building shared a single payphone that was in the hall outside our door. It would ring incessantly day and night. I slept on a fold-out couch. My 2 roommates had bunk beds, and one of them had a cello that took up a considerable amount of our limited floor space. Once a week, I would cash a traveler's check at Sainsbury's to access the money I'd saved from a summer of mowing lawns back in Kansas City, Missouri, and go pick up the new copy of Time Out. It was the biggest moment of the week. Before I'd moved to London, I had never been to a club, much less a warehouse party or rave, but I had read about acts like the KLF and Underworld and Rolling Stone and Spin, and I had a high degree of curiosity about this new world of electronic music. So I'd open Time Out and flip to the club listings, find 5 club nights that cost £5 or less because I was on a budget, and then throughout the week, I'd set out into the night on foot or by tube to go explore the electronic music universe, usually by myself, sometimes with a friend or two who I'd talked into coming along. I had no idea who the DJs were, who I was seeing. I didn't understand the distinctions between the different genres, but that's how I experienced trance, techno, house, and drum and bass for the first time at clubs like Strawberry Sunday, the legendary Megatripolis, and a bunch of other clubs whose names I've forgotten and probably never knew in the first place. I did make one big splurge to go to Ministry of Sound, and it was well worth it. I grew up playing in punk rock and hardcore bands, as you've probably heard me talk about on this show before, and I did not see this pivot into electronic music coming. But over the years, electronic music ended up becoming a core part of my life, and later, a subject of my journalism. I went on to write about raving at Disneyland, full moon gatherings in the Mojave Desert, sound system clashes at Burning Man, and all kinds of different twists, turns, nooks and crannies within the world of electronic music. I had the privilege of interviewing and profiling artists like John Digweed, Daft Punk, The Crystal Method, DJ Rap, and many more. Early in that journey in Los Angeles in 1997, I met a person who steered me into my first paid journalism assignment with Vice, gave me my first DJing tutorial on a pair of Technics 1200s, and became a lifelong friend. And that's my guest today. Chris Muniz, aka DJ Nightstalker, is a scholar, writer, and prominent drum and bass DJ. He holds a PhD in creative writing and literature from USC, where he is a professor, and for several decades, he has been an influential electronic music journalist and essayist, publishing in outlets including Bassrush, Insomniac, Herb, Accelerator, ATM, and Kmag. You can find a link in the show notes to his influential essay, How to Talk to Your Kids About Drum and Bass. Chris has been a force on the Los Angeles and global drum and bass scenes since the late 90s, when he had a weekly show on vibeflow.com alongside heavies like Photek, Panacea, and others. From underground warehouse parties to LA's Respect to massive festivals like EDC Vegas, Nocturnal Wonderland, EDC Mexico, and many more, Chris has made crowds large and gigantic go nuts. On top of all of this, he is a husband and a father with a 4-year-old and a 16-year-old. Chris and I met in the MFA writing program at Cal Arts in the late 90s, where we studied with the storied cultural critic Dick Hebdige and witnessed many interesting acts of music and art. You can find Chris on Instagram at dj.nightstalker and all over the internet and sites like Mixcloud, SoundCloud, and YouTube. You can find a full link list in the show notes. If you're new to this show, thank you for listening, and please take a moment to subscribe, hit 5 stars, and leave a review wherever you listen. I really appreciate it, and it helps more people find the show because it will surface higher in search. Choose the Hard Way is a podcast where my guests share stories about how hard things build stronger humans. I'm Andrew Vontz, and I've spent more than 25 years telling and shaping the stories of the world's top performers, brands, and businesses. I've held executive and senior leadership roles at the social network for athletes Strava and the human performance company TRX. For a decade, I was a journalist, and my byline has appeared in dozens of top outlets, including Rolling Stone, Outside Magazine, the Los Angeles Times, and many more. Today, I advise and consult with businesses and nonprofits on high-impact storytelling strategies, and I coach leaders to become high-performance communicators. If you'd like to work with me, reach out on LinkedIn or send an email to choosethehardway@gmail.com. I'm considering sponsorship from mission-aligned brands to support this show, and if that's you, or if you'd like to suggest a guest, reach out. Sign up for the newsletter at choosethehardway.com to get exclusive stories about the hard way, a behind-the-scenes look at what you hear on the podcast, episode updates, and more. As always, you can find all of those links in the show notes.
You were there at the start of DJ Nightstalker, but before that, I was like you. I was just a fan, into music. I had arrived in LA in like early 90s, right when the rave scene was kind of kicking off, and my girlfriend at the time would take me to these raves in LA, and it was just blow my mind. I had no idea what these spaces were. I grew up in Colorado, and then here I am at some janky warehouse in East LA, and at that time the scene was actually even segregated a little bit, right? There was like a Latino East Side scene, and then there was a kind of a wider West Side scene or in the Valley scene. And so it was like Latin Underground and DJ Humpty Vision and people like that, and it was just like house music, techno, things like that. And but I think right around 95 is when I got turned on to Diesel Boy mixtape Supreme, and I was just like, what is this? What is this sound? What is this? I don't even know what this is. It was like everything. It was like reggae and punk and break beats and hardcore and techno all mixed into one big lump, and so I just sort of got into it from there, and then started, like you said, partying and going to the figuring out who these people were, who these artists were. The UK is the sort of motherland, so listening to all the kind of pirate radio broadcasts and mixtapes coming out of there as well.
And what was your musical taste prior to getting to Los Angeles?
I think so. My dad was big into music, so we, and he had a huge vinyl collection, which I've been lucky enough to inherit. And so, just growing up, I'd listen to everything from like Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd to, soul and funk and Average White Band and War and Teddy Pendergrass, all that kind of stuff. My dad had a really eclectic music taste as well. So, and his record collection made me just want to, consume and collect music too. So, I probably got like Janet Jackson Rhythm Nation in there, as well as Huey Lewis and the News or something. Who knows? Like I was still into the kind of pop music. But I loved like those kind of Saturday night, Sunday night dance mixes, to kind of thing. Be like, oh, what's this 12-inch version of Bobby Brown, or whatever it is. You'd find a vinyl that had like the club mix of it. And you'd be like, whoa, this is crazy, So yeah. So when I came to LA, there's a lot of record stores, at that time. Even though CD technology had taken off for the mainstream, DJing was still for a long time until the early 2000s, mainly vinyl, So You'd get these special, white label releases out of the UK. You'd start following artists and labels, and you'd buy like the Metalheads box set and that kind of thing. You just sort of kind of self-educate yourself in a way. You'd hear it in a mix. You'd be like, "What's that record?" I got to figure out what that record is or who that is, and yeah, it just sort of evolved that way.
And when you were a kid, when would you all listen to music? When would vinyl be on in your house? And what was kind of the space that it had in your day-to-day in your life?
Yeah, I had my own little record player. I can still see it. It's like a little blue record player where like a 12-inch would fit, like be bigger than it. You get like a little 45 RPM. 45 RPM, the little 10-inch one. And listen to those. My first, like when I would get good grades, I'd get stuff, So my first record was like the Star Wars theme, and then on the back was the Cantina song, I still remember that. In middle school, I got like all A's or an A on something that maybe I wasn't doing good in, and then I got my mom bought me I got to pick the record. She had no idea what was going on, but it was like a Prince's 1999 double vinyl LP kind of thing. So I always had my own music, but in terms of my mom and dad, they used to go out and dance all the time, right? And in my mind, it was like they're going out to like a disco and like, I don't know, like in Carlito's Way or something like that, like something that looked like New York or something, Who knows though, for the reality. Now that I'm older, I'm like, really? Where I grew up? It's probably some janky bar or something. But they were getting dressed up and going out. My dad would put music on. So we'd always have music. My dad loved to kind of work outside in his shop. Music always constantly running. Sometimes we just sit down. I remember listening to like Dark Side of the Moon, front to back, just sitting there, like, and he loved stereos too. So he had like a kind of, we'd make sure there was stereophonic sound coming in both sides and just listen to the whole thing. And yeah, so, that connection to my music kind of goes back to that love as well.
That's one of the funny things about the proliferation of digital technologies and the digital listening experience now is whatever. You might have a bunch of Bluetooth speakers in your house, or you get in your car and listen to it, but most people don't have the stereo, right? Like my father-in-law, he's got in the barn, he's got an old, it's probably from the 80s, like the tall speakers. There's an old record player in there, equalizer with like 25 different things.
Yeah.
It's just a fun way to listen to music that most kids probably aren't getting exposed to anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was, I can't remember what age I was, but one of my Christmas presents was a boombox, and it was like two cassette players, two cassette decks side by side, you could record, things and play things, but also it had the equalizer. And then of course I had in my stereo set, it was like an amp, and then you'd have the record player, and then you'd have, my uncle had like this crazy one that had like a whole separate, like 5 separate components and, so yeah, it was pretty cool.
So to fast forward to today,
yeah,
you're out there, you're playing in the United States, you're playing in Mexico.
Yeah.
You're probably playing other places internationally. You've been part of the Red Bull Music Academy. Mm-hmm. What role does music play in your life today, and where are you at on your journey as a DJ? And I don't even know if you produce or not, or what's going on with that.
Yeah, no, it's been it's hard to believe it's been decades, right? So when I knew you at Cal Arts back in the day when horse and buggies were still around, I had a internet radio show, right? They had like a slot. I would play records. I didn't know how to beat match, but I would play all those records that I had sort of been collecting. My time slot put me right around midnight on a Thursday in the UK. And so I'd play like old Photek record, kind of, or old then. Then it was fresh. Now it's old. Play it to the end, and then like just kind of talk over it, and then just kind of classic. No beat matching, nothing like that. But it took off. It took off in a big way. And then, that sort of led me on this journey to now where I'm like still considered kind of like an elder statesman, tastemaker or something like that. I did my time writing for a lot of UK mags like Knowledge Magazine, US mags like Herb, Accelerator, those kind of things. Back when they were print magazines, and you'd go to Tower Records to kind of, figure out what was going on in the music world. And now I just been able to channel that into being able to DJ, pretty much on a regular basis. I always say, I'll retire when people stop booking me, but I keep getting booked. Just played EDC Mexico, during the height of my vinyl era, I played like Japan and those places that were huge, and played around the United States a lot. But yeah, it's kind of settled into this nice space where I'm doing drum and bass, perhaps not as often, but bigger parties. And then I'm kind of doing this kind of side thing where I'm doing like tech house and techno at the after hours here in LA. And, it's just having a blast with it, really.
And I know part of what attracted both of us to Cal Arts, where we were both in the MFA writing program. It was an interesting program at the time, and probably still now, because it was in the School of Critical Studies, and it was a hybrid of people doing criticism or theory-oriented work. There were some people who were doing some prose, some people doing poetry, and some people doing things with pieces of wood in the program as well, which is cool. I mean, there's a lot of different stuff going on. It was an interesting time and place, but I think part of what you and I both enjoyed about that experience is that we got to study with the Englishman, Dick Hebdige, author of Subculture, Meaning of Style, from the Stuart Hall School of Cultural Criticism, kind of ground zero for that whole movement. And you're both a practitioner of this culture, and I see you as an anthropologist, a cultural anthropologist of this culture. And it's been like that since the beginning. In fact, I would say the reason that I personally initially went down the road of being a journalist was because of you. Because, nice. I mean, I had been a journalist in high school, and I was the editor of the school paper and stuff. But once we were at Cal Arts, you were writing for Vice, and you were like, "Hey, man, I got paid $50 to write this thing." Yeah. To write this thing for Vice. I was like, "Oh, that sounds kind of cool." You like kicked me the editor's email, who I believe was Sarush, right?
Yeah,
Sarush Alvey, one of the founders of Vice, and I wrote my first story, and then it was kind of off to the races from there for the next decade. But for you, what have you enjoyed about being both a practitioner and this observer or anthropologist? Why does that fascinate you, or what do you enjoy about it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there, right? With all the way from Dick Hebdige to, kind of being a participant as well as a scholar in this area. I think one of the things that attracted me to drum bass at the time was it was this scene that was just kind of starting out in LA. It had been around obviously in the UK for a bit, but LA's scene was just taking off right in the mid 90s. And I was kind of at ground zero, and I was like, oh, this is what it feels like to be a part of a movement, kind of to be at the beginning of something. I think people born in our generation and maybe even later still look back at like the hippies or something like that. What would it have been to have been like a part of that or something? So it felt like something weird, like some kind of, like if you were there at the beginning of punk rock or something, and you could be a part of it. So it was one of those things. And it was like, the years roll by, and it's like you look around and you're like, well, I really know everybody, and I know all these things, and people know me, and I have a profile or something like that. But it's something about it fed into, I think, that kind of Dick Hebdige, how do I make sense of this? How do I articulate this experience? The music, and just being in Los Angeles at that time, kind of creeping from warehouse to warehouse type vibe, really kind of appealed to this kind of dark aesthetic and cinematic post-apocalyptic thing that I loved in general, that sort of thing. It's weird. I've only done one kind of scholarly thing with it, right? And I kind of try to keep the worlds different. I'm not sure how to connect them, I think, is in one way. But then writing journalistically has always been my primary outlet in terms of translating the music, trying to sort of articulate what it is about bass music culture in general. I have a piece on Insomniac, how to talk to your kids about drum and bass. That's like probably the clearest sort of version of like of me trying to articulate what this scene is about and everything like that. So
I haven't read that piece, but I definitely want to check it out, and I'll include a link to it in the show notes for this. I have to ask, does it include something about the Amen break?
Yeah. Yep. All that's in there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So all that was fascinating to me. So, right. So I think, again, this idea that this music really felt like bits and pieces of culture, kind of really contemporary, kind of modern thing, right? There's this link, that lineage that goes back to Jamaica sound systems, right? Sound system culture and rewinds and the MCs toasting and all these kind of things. But then there's like a little thread that when it gets to the UK, it gets merged with like ska and hardcore breakbeat techno and those kind of things. It was just fascinating the way this amalgamum became something new. I think was really fascinating to me.
In Los Angeles, to me I'm partial to it. I spent, I don't remember how many years, almost 15 years, I think, in LA, and you've been there way longer than the amount of time that I spent there. Yeah. I'm not even going to say how many years it's been that you've been in Los Angeles, because it's, we don't want people to be able to ID that. Right. But Los Angeles always struck me, as it has many other people who have lived there, written about it, made art about it, as a city upon which people project their fantasies, where it has a limitless nature to it that's unlike any city in the world I've ever experienced. Yeah. And because of its massiveness as a megalopolis, it truly does seem infinite in terms of the access that you can have to different experiences, different subcultures. I was recently back there in the fall. I went to a techno warehouse party, and I hadn't been to I also went out to Moon Tribe for the first time in like 12, 13 years. It's changed a little bit. Yeah. Downtown, not so much, right? But it's crazy that there are all these spaces and places where all of this possibility can continue to proliferate, and these things can happen. And versus the Bay Area, for example, during the decade that I was there, I moved there at a time when the police were proactively busting every party that happened everywhere. It was their policy to show up, and they would confiscate the sound systems. And that was the way they disincentivized promoters from actually throwing events. And it led to a very stale and, to me, not super interesting scene that really became oriented around Burning Man and kind of hyper affluent tech people who had their own sound systems. There were some cool parties, but not quite the same. How do you see Los Angeles and its place both in the popular imagination as well as within the community where you're making things?
Yeah, I mean, to me, they're bound one and the same. It really didn't hit me until I actually kind of left Los Angeles and started playing in places like, I don't know, I'm going to go play in Albuquerque again, but back in the day, I'd go play in Albuquerque or Indiana or somewhere where there's like, the scene is super small and they didn't have a kind of infrastructure, and you'd show up and you'd be, at this club with all the kind of misfits of society, in Indiana or something like that. And in LA, you're like, well, this stuff is huge. It's mainstream almost, you can hear some of this on the radio. You have these tribes, there's enough space almost where there could be multiple parties on a night, and a scene can develop, and people can support different events and promoters and all these kind of things. It's just sort of this magical place that I don't know how you would describe it. It's a place that's harsh because it can be lonely, right? Because it is so huge. And yet if you find a little tribe within that, then it becomes like this sort of special thing where you're like, the city becomes your own kind of little playground, or, these areas within the city or outside the city, like you said, desert parties become your own little playground. And I think part of that is its proximity to sort of the film industry as well, right? This sort of kind of magical overflow of it. People sort of are gravitated there for different reasons. The city itself is a kind of, unfolding of movies and subcultures in general. Almost on every corner, you can see these places clashing. I think it's just a sort of fascinating, fertile space for the good and the bad, I guess you could say, of the party scene. Yeah.
When I was back there in the fall, my buddy Steve Allison, shout out Steve if you're listening, love you, man. We used to go to a lot of parties and events back in the day in the late 90s, early 2000s when I was living in LA. And, here we are, a couple of people later in life going to check something out. I mean, I remember thinking, gosh, it's going to be hard to stay up past 10 p.m. tonight. I got two kids back home in Maine. This is kind of past my bedtime. But we went out, and when we were trying to find something to do, it wasn't, oh, this is the thing that's happening tonight. It was, this is one of 20 underground parties that are listed on a website. And the thing that kind of blew my mind is, these are totally illegal events that you can go look up on the internet, and for whatever reason, they're not getting busted. My sense is probably because there are much more dangerous things happening down the block that the police actually have to pay attention to. Yeah. And that kind of creates this aporia or liminal space where these fantastic events can exist. But
Yeah.
right, because scenes aren't like that everywhere. Usually there's a lot of surveillance. The police are on top of it. There's no denying that there's a commingling of the music subculture with some other subcultures where there are perhaps some more illegal things going on.
Yeah.
Right. But why does LA have these spaces?
I think it goes, the spaces, because it's a kind of industrial, post-industrial city as well, right? So there's a lot of these spaces. I think it goes up and down, or it has over the years, where police attention has been sort of, shut down things, and it's sort of been kind of hard to have parties, or you just retreat to clubs. And, Insomniac's infamous sort of, was it EDC or something? I don't know. One of them that at the Coliseum, people,
I was there.
Somebody died and that sort of thing. So like, that shuts that down. We got to kind of move out to outside of LA city limits. It's sort of famously moved to Las Vegas now. And yet you can still have Cascade and Deadmau5, taking over the Coliseum for a single, electronic music show, which happened recently as well. So it's like this weird underground, overground, big clubs, small clubs thing. But I think the attention right now is on, I don't know, fentanyl and drug trafficking, and these people who get together and sort of race cars and do all that sort of stuff. And I think violence and has sort of luckily sort of stayed away from the scene for at least at the current time, right? And I think if something like that sort of starts to merge, then maybe police activity will come to. But I think it's just a huge space that it's just impossible to sort of navigate. And I'm sure on some level the police are like, people just need some kind of release valve, as long as it doesn't bother the neighbors or something.
Yeah, and amazingly, for people that aren't super familiar with Los Angeles, the part of it that they probably have heard about most recently in the news, I would say, is Skid Row.
Yeah.
And Skid Row, or the Garment District, has dozens, if not hundreds, of warehouse spaces, and at night it's completely abandoned.
Yeah.
There are probably some condos down there, but not many people live there, and that means that parties can happen down there at night, right?
Yeah. It's a huge sort of space. And when you're flying in, you just cannot believe just how long the city is. There'll be like, you look out and it's maybe like San Bernardino or something. It's like, yeah, we're, the pilot comes on, we're 20 minutes from landing, kind of thing. And you're just going over houses and houses and spaces and spaces. And then this whole sort of east side, of downtown is just industrial wasteland at night and in the day, kind of thing. So it's plenty of spaces. And
Chris, with the specific type of drum and bass that you're spinning, or that's of most interest to you, for people that aren't deeply familiar with the genres and subgenres and branch genres of that, how do you characterize the type of music that you're spinning right now? And then I also know, and I'm very curious about, I see that you now have a tech house presence. Like I love tech house. I predominantly love techno. That's what I like to spin the most when I'm DJing.
Yeah.
But tell us a little bit about the types of sounds that you find to be attractive. How would you characterize them, and why are you drawn to those strains specifically?
Yeah, I mean, for me, especially now, it's just all about big, epic cinematic vibes that, get people dancing and kind of going crazy, whatever that is. Big, epic breakdowns, but I love melodies. I love sort of, again, that journey of push and pull with an audience, where you kind of push them to the harder sounds and then kind of pull back to a kind of melodic, maybe even almost poppy kind of vibe. Get those hands up, get you, almost like back in the trance days, where you feel like your heart's going to break or something, and then hit them hard again, kind of thing. But I think, honestly, that's what I'm attracted to, and I think that's like the key of my continued success as a DJ is this ability for that journey, right? We hear a lot about kind of the journey of DJing, but it's, some people go in and they'll go all in and they'll say, I'm a neurofunk DJ, right? Which is like that really techie, hard stuff. And then they just kind of hit that the whole set, So I'll play neurofunk. I'll play liquid, which is that kind of what most people is probably a good entryway for non-DnB people, Netsky and, or even, there's this kind of mixture of stuff like, I don't even know what you'd call it, upfront DnB, I think it's sometimes called, with like Dimension, Subfocus. It'll be on the pop charts in the UK. And these guys, know how to sort of use orchestral sort of melodic elements and vocals, and yet it's still, got a nice hard edge to it, that kind of thing. I mean, I'll play it all. I'll listen. I listen to so many promos, like, and before a set, like a big set, especially, I'll have like 200 tunes I got to try to work through that I've already, kind of self-selected to even download in the first place out of all the, music that's sort of coming through my inbox. And then just start to whittle it down and try to figure out, how's this going to flow? Where's a big movement? Where's a place to start that's kind of epic, that builds? When can it sort of vibe it out, kind of almost hypnotize, and then crack that hypnotism with something really big, that kind of thing. So,
what are your filters when you're sitting down to listen to a bunch of tracks and you're trying to select, okay, what's going to go into a potential set? And I'm also curious, the way you do that now versus the way you might have done that in Culver City in 1998 when you and I were fucking around with the turntables on the floor in your bedroom.
Yeah. No, I think back then, and this is one of the biggest lessons I learned, is like, just because it's unreleased doesn't mean you play it, right? So back then I would be like, oh, it's a dub plate. No one has this song. I have to drop it, and you'd kind of force music in, or, you try to play, you kind of pre-anticipate what the audience wants, or so. I don't know how it was different. Now I'm a little more selfish, but a lot more aware of what the audience needs in terms of flexibility, in terms of where I'm at, playing at, right? If it's an underground, if it's a big festival, if it's a club or something like that, you usually get a sense of what kind of vibes they're into. And the filters are, the first filter is just, do I like it? And then I'll, just download it. And then from there, as I start to approach a specific gig, I'll run them through. I'll try to whittle it down to at least 100, 125, just so I'm not overloaded with too much music. I'll run it through Mixed in Key, which is a software that puts everything in, gives you an idea of the key, but also there's like this kind of harmonic, which things resonate with other songs. And then I'll sometimes and then I put it in Record Box and do a kind of run through and start to play around with order of things and which songs kind of go together, which song sounds like a kind of intro-y song, which song kind of feels like, oh, this is that 3/4 mark where you want to kind of hit it hard. Here's a song to take a breath, that kind of thing. And if you have like 4 or 5 songs to take a breath all in a row, you're like, I got to trim these out. I got to figure out which one or two are the kind of best version of this moment, that kind of thing. Yeah. Some classics that everyone recognizes, new things no one notices. Yeah.
Yeah. You had an Instagram post recently, and you have a very active social media presence, which is great. And if people want to follow you, we'll have those links in the show notes. And I have to imagine that that's probably fun and also a bit of a burden, right? To have to do that all the time. Yeah. But you dropped a track that was the intro from Welcome to the Jungle, I think, right?
Yeah.
Was that a tech house track or was that drum and bass?
That was tech house. Yeah. That's a tech house tune. It's, I want to say Cloverdale and DJ Susan bootleg or edit or something like that. And the minute I heard it, I was like, okay, I know this is what's going to crack. This will crack that audience open. So leading up to that, though, right? So this is a good insight into the kind of decision-making process. It's like, well, I could open with that, right? When here's my set, I could open with that. Coming off the other DJ, I wasn't quite the headliner that night, right? There was this German duo that was a headliner. So I kind of wanted to build towards. So I actually kind of opened with techno, and I opened with kind of just that kind of solid thumping techno, Charlotte DeWitt style, where you're just kind of in the zone. You got like a little vocal loop or something, then it pulls up for a minute, and then it hits again, and like the hi-hat comes in, So I was just kind of setting that kind of hypnotism, get them in the mood, and then all of a sudden, welcome to the jungle, And so that was like that kind of moment of orchestrating that build towards that breaking point. That was really sort of satisfying to see, because people went nuts when that thing dropped.
Yeah, I felt like I would have gone nuts had I heard that. And so I can imagine what it was like when you first heard that track. And when you heard that, was that released or not? Or
I remember I just got on promo like last week, right? That party you're referring to was this past weekend. So I don't know if it's out yet or not, and it just said white label. So sometimes those things only go out to DJs, and maybe sometimes I don't know if it'll show up on Beatport or not. It seems like it might be problematic because it's a pretty big chunk of the whole song,
Yeah. Yeah, I recently came across a remix of California Dreaming that was like a tech house track,
Yeah.
and I bought it because I was like, I don't know, I have no idea how it's going to fit into one of my super important tracks that I'm recording here in my home office. If anybody wants to book me, holler at me. But yeah, I was like, I don't know how this fits in somewhere, but it just sounded quite interesting, unexpected, and like you said, like the kind of thing that would definitely lift a crowd up in some kind of way at the right moment.
Yeah. No, songs like that are good. And then the hard part is, then that video goes, relatively, like a lot of people see it and it's like, oh shit, can I play that again? I got to, now I can't play it again. That kind of, I gotta like save that for another year or something. I don't know.
During the time that you've been DJing, which at this point, again, like I don't want to dime you out, but we're talking decades of DJing at this point.
Yeah.
What's happened with people's attention spans as it pertains to listening? Because there's the whole, I mean, I know that you're not in the bro step genre or not even anywhere close to that. There's much more musicality and narrative to what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of audience expectations, particularly people who aren't heads, who are just like, I'm here to party. They're there for the drop.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate that as a DJ?
Yeah, I think, things have changed. I'm kind of one of the last of a dying breed of people who are just like probably DJs first. And, the love of music came first before, and the other things just kind of fell into place. Nowadays, a lot of young producers will produce first and then get gigs and then, of course, emulate whatever it is they see on YouTube or whatever. So a lot of my, like Carl Cox and these kind of old school, and again, Charlotte DeWitt, like as a contemporary, I just love these mixes where things, drawn out. Sometimes I'll listen to these mixes. I'll be like, there's no way I could play a tune for like 7 minutes and people would be into it, So that's the trade-off. But I do love layering things, right? That's sort of what I pull from that. But the mixes do have to be faster, right? So to keep a contemporary audience's attention, 2 to 3 minutes per song is probably a lot even. Sometimes you only get like a minute of a tune. But sometimes I'll slow it down. I'll let a song kind of drop, roll through a drop, come through, and then I'll have like 2 or 3 songs stacked up where I'm just sort of dropping really quickly into them and stuff. But, there's this trend where a lot of these jump up guys will, they'll double drop, triple drop. Like in other words, they're the drops are sort of on top of each other and you're hearing different elements of it, or it starts to build into a familiar song and then they pull back into another song and then jump into it and things like that, right? And for a long time I felt pressure, like I have to double drop, but just didn't feel authentic to me. And and I'll still double drop, but mine's a little more, I don't know what you like, techno style or something, who knows how you do it type thing. But there's pressure, especially rhythm and dubstep. Those guys are just cranking through 30 seconds on a tune at a time. There's drum bass DJs who will go online and say, yeah, they'll brag about, I went through like 100 tunes in an hour or something. And I'm like, oh, that's crazy. In my playlists, I'll try to have, 60 tunes, which gives each song a minute. But even then I won't get through all 60 tunes, kind of thing. Yeah.
And again, for people that maybe aren't as familiar with the technical side of DJing, when you pull up and you're going to do a set, I don't even know if you get to sound check or what, but is there a lot of uniformity to the gear that you're using and interoperability? Or are you ever pulling up and you're like, man, I'm not super familiar with this system that I'm playing on tonight?
Yeah. And I mean, ideally, right, the Pioneer CDJs, right, the kind of Nexus 2000s and up, Pioneer mixer is pretty standard across the board, right? So if you can sort of pull up in one of those, then I'm comfortable. If it's a different kind of mixer, sometimes I get thrown off. The worst actually for me was, and I power through everything because I just go back to the underground days when it was like you got to deal with everything, sound going out, wind, whatever it is, needle skipping. But the worst for me is like a controller, right? Which is a lot of these smaller, kids will bring you out to like, I don't know, Riverside or something, and then you show up and there's like a controller and you're like, shit, I don't know how to use this thing, I've never practiced it. And it's like, there's like one screen in the middle and I don't know, all kinds of buttons and stuff. So it's like one of those things where if you want to stay on top of it, I've always thought I got to go to like Guitar Center and just see if they'll let me play with all the equipment or something.
And when you play, are you playing 2 channels, 4 channels, sampler? Like, what do you run?
4 is ideal, right? For me, 4 CDJs. If anything, just so I could set up where I'm going and how fast I can sort of get there. I have hot cues on almost every song. Every song I'll run through. Anything I play, right, will go through mixed in key, and then record box. So record box allows you to set cue points. So I don't have to always play the beginning of the song. Sometimes I'll drop right into the middle. Sometimes I'll drop, really fast. So I only need like 30 seconds, and I could just hit that cue point and get right in there. A little bit. Sometimes I'll use like loops and things like that, but I don't try to get too crazy. I'll use like filters and echo and that kind of stuff. For me, it's more about like songs kind of gel together. I actually like it really seamless. One of the sort of best compliments I could get is like, I don't know when one tune ends and the other one begins. That's sort of cool for me. So,
how much time do you put into preparing for a set, and how much of it is pre-planned in terms of track to track or movement to movement within the set?
So movement is really what I'm not concerned about, but what's foremost in my mind. So I'll have a playlist. Let's say I don't, I almost never have time to do a complete run through. My CDJs sit there gathering dust half the time. Most of the time I'll just do it in the computer, just going, these are going to go well with this, and this is going to go well with that. And, sometimes you get there and you look at the clock and you're like, oh shit, I'm going too fast. Like I just burned through 20 tunes and, I still got 50 minutes to go or whatever it is, or sometimes you're going too slow. So you have to be able to sort of move past tunes, around tunes. So that kind of flexibility is built into what I do, where it's not necessarily pre-planned, but I do put a lot of work into cultivating a playlist that will work almost no matter what, if that makes sense, right? So the important part of being confident going in there is just trust the system. All this work that you put into this, these songs are going to fit in some way. All these little puzzle pieces will fit in some way. And it's ongoing. So, got a gig in a week or something, I'll still be going through promos now. But then, like, especially if it's a big show the day before, 2 days before, it's just like, it could take hours just trying to sort of decide what music is actually going to make it in. I'll have like a folder and I'll call it like EDC Mexico Raw, and it'll be like all the tunes that are up for consideration, and then trim those down into like the EDC Mexico final playlist or something.
What's been the gig that you found to be the most challenging to navigate as a DJ? Because there are probably other gigs in life that have been challenging as well. But yeah, I mean, in the long multi-decade career you've had now, what's been your biggest like, oh shit?
Yeah, I mean, you try to erase those. It is the nature of this. For me, it's still kind of a hobby, right? I have a real career as a professor. If anything, that's the real challenge, is balancing this with being a professor and being a parent of 2 kids and a husband. That's the real challenge. We could come back to that. But honestly, just being hard on yourself and fucking up, right? And fucking up in front of people, like whether you screw up or these people brought me out here, they paid me a lot of money, and that just was not a good set. I was tired. That guy before me was way better than me, and he's a local. There's all these things. When you don't do great, the crowd leaves. I think that's the worst, is when you clear the floor back in the day, especially, right, when drum and bass still wasn't quite as open, right? Or people weren't as open to it unless you were a hardcore drum bass head, and it's like you come on and then there's 2 people out there. I've had that recently, actually. You go play this giant festival, and then you come and do some like San Diego party, and there's like a techno dude upstairs who's going on at the same time as you, and suddenly the dance floor clears out, and you're like, oh, you're sad. It hurts. My Twitter reach isn't any good. I'm like, fuck Twitter. I'm not gonna pay no $8 for a blue check. Instagram's good though. But yeah, it's every time I go on Twitter, my heart's broken. I'm like, oh, I got 2 likes or something. Yeah.
Have you ever had the power go out or have your computer fail in the middle of a set?
So I put it all on USB. I'll bring 2 USBs, right? So I'll have a backup USB in case there's a problem with that. Oh, okay. So here's a good specific story. EDC Vegas. It was me back to back with this group called Consoles. I can't remember what year it was. This pre-pandemic. And, so we're the first ones opening the festival or whatever, like, on a Saturday or whatever it is. And for whatever reason, all of the CDJs just kept going into emergency loops. Like, you build up to a big festival. You're like, this is going to be a dope set. Here's my like 10 minutes. And then they're going to do 10 minutes. And I'm going to do 10 minutes, back and forth. And you'd get through like 2-3 songs. And it was like, it just sucked. It hurt the whole time. And the sound guy's like, yeah, you just got to like give it a second. I guess it was some kind of weird timing issue with whoever had used it last. Like they had their, I don't know, their Serato or something. And it had screwed up the timing. We were turning things on and off. Anyway, that was a horrible set. But by the end, it kind of worked itself out. But it's painful.
Did the crowd stick around for that one?
Yeah, I mean, they stuck around, but that wasn't like the best set that I go back to or anything like that.
What has been your best set?
EDC Mexico is always just epic. I mean, like the crowd down there is insanely supportive for one, but they're also just so into it. I've been down there about 4 or 5 years. Now, and even the first year when I just went down there, I just made like fans that year that have just stuck with me until now. So this last time I played, we had a meet and greet and had like this huge line of like people I didn't know, but a lot of the kids from that first year who like, they drew art, they made their own kind of flags with my name on it and that sort of thing. And so it's just hugely sort of rewarding to connect with people, I guess, on that level. But then of course the show itself was just like, like you just, when you nail it and you're like, and you're in like a state of flow and you're like, that was a good set. That was my best festival set, probably this last EDC Mexico set.
That's awesome. And you have that set up on YouTube now, right?
Up on YouTube. And then I'll probably just re-record the songs and put it on SoundCloud or something like that, unless I can figure out how to sort of isolate the sound from the YouTube. There's like 2 points in there that got dinged for copyright, so they're like silence. If you're listening to the YouTube and it goes silent for like 3 minutes, that's because YouTube said this song's not allowed or whatever. You have to mute it.
I have no idea. I never went to like EDM stuff. That was never my thing. I did go to, I went to Electric Daisy Carnival when it was in a field. It wasn't in Valencia, but it was somewhere up north of the city. Mm-hmm. I have photographs on, like physical photographs from that event. I went with the photographer I was working with a lot at the time. Nice. When I was a journalist. And it's grown a little bit since then. But within the context of an event like that, where does drum and bass fit into the overall mix? Has the genre grown in popularity? Has it kind of like peaked out? Like what's going on?
It's still, the bastard child of EDM, right? So mainstream stuff, obviously your Tiestos and your Armin van Buren's and things like that. Techno's up there. House is always up there. Dubstep still reigns supreme, or bass music in general, because it's kind of pushed into liquid strangers like freeform bass, and then like, I don't know who would be Subtronics or something like that. It's like kind of maybe more straightforward dubstep or the new school version of it. But drum and bass is being played by a lot of those guys, so it's like we're at one of those weird inflection points where you'll see a dubstep guy go on YouTube, say, oh, I made this drum and bass banger, and then everybody's like, yeah, that's awesome, and then nobody comes out to a drum and bass party with real drum and bass DJs or something like that. There's people like Reaper who are somewhere in between, right? Someone who's been influenced and whose kind of network is this bass music scene, who plays a kind of different style of drum and bass than maybe the UK forebearers did, kind of thing. So it's there, it's popular in its own way. And a lot of people, because of those people who are playing it, Rusko used to be as a dubstep pioneer, right? Went full on playing drum and bass, right? So now he only plays drum and bass in his sets. Whereas back in the day, it used to be everyone was playing drum and bass, and dubstep comes along, and then everybody ditched drum and bass to go play dubstep. So
it's been an interesting evolution. I even remember, breaks were huge from probably like 2001 to maybe 2007. I remember going to Warehouse after hours. I don't remember what year, maybe like 2004, 2005, downtown LA. And DJ Lauren would be there playing Breaks, who then became Bass Nectar,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And a lot of people just kept branching off in different forks, and a lot of everything kind of like kept moving in the direction of bass music or
Yeah.
dubstep. For you, why have you been ride or die drum and bass?
Ride or die.
Why did you never become a why did you never become a bass music person, right? And what happened to breaks? Breaks were cool and they're
Breaks
totally gone, man.
disappeared. Yeah, I don't know. Two-step, right? UK garage, I guess, is what most of that energy probably went into. But it's definitely not as big as it was back then. You know, and this is you know, my wife would always tell me to sell out and just make dubstep and things like that. Two things.
Good advice.
Two things. I was there from the beginning, so that's one, right? These are all my people. Drum and bass is like your tribe. And then the other thing is, you know, in the midst of all this, I got a PhD and things. You know, I couldn't. You know, there was a point, and it's probably around the time my son was born, where I was like, you know, I'm still conservative at the core, where it's like, you know, do I produce music and be a DJ, you know, a producer for, you know, and elevate this to be big, maybe, right? Or do I get this PhD and go, you know, be a professor, which seems a lot more, you know, I'll have a retirement. How's that? You know, I'll be stable. I could buy you know, I've been able to buy a house and things like that. Whereas DJing, you know, a lot of those people that I come up with who are still DJing, I'm like, man, I don't know what these guys do as their side hustle, you know, or what are we going to do when we're 60, or, you know, that kind of thing. So balancing those two worlds for me has always been kind of an eternal struggle. You know, in terms of production and that kind of thing, putting in the effort into a PhD kind of pulled me away from that. And drum and bass has always been where my name was made, and you know, how I was known in the world and that kind of thing. So, and honestly, I'll like some dubstep, but I can't hear it. You know, I can't do it for a whole hour or something.
I agree with you. Sometimes I'll actually go on to Spotify or SoundCloud or Mixcloud,
Yeah,
and I'll have an open mind. I'm like, I'll give this a try. I'll, you know, go to the Beatport top 100 dubstep tracks or whatever.
Yeah.
It's so infrequent that I find something I like. Whereas if I go back to like LTJ Bookham, something like that, like it's always on, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, and some of those sounds have persisted, others have faded away. But Chris, can you say more about this tension between having more or less like a normal life and like going out and being in this world of nonstop partying, stuff's going all night, and a lot of people probably have something of an idea of what that DJ lifestyle is like, but what's it like? What are the tension points?
I mean, the biggest tension point is having a family, right? So if I was a single guy, this would be a breeze. Well, I don't know if it'd be a breeze. It'd be a lot less tension, a lot less friction. How's that? So, you know, I got to get up, take the kids to school. I got to put my daughter's 4 years old to bed every night. You know, I got to be present, you know, I got to show up for my students. I got to grade papers. I got to, you know, still have my shit together on that end. And then the weekend comes and it's like, okay, I got to, you know, my time slot's 3 a.m., 4 a.m. Let me put the baby to bed, then take a nap or something. And then, and then wake up, go to this thing, do it, come back. They get up the next day, you know, act like nothing ever happened. How was last night? Yeah, it was cool. You know, I got like 4 hours sleep or something like that. And then just go back into this normie life. Or my students are like, how was your weekend? Yeah, it was fine. You know, I don't usually tell them till the end of the semester. I think the older students, you know, I teach advanced writing also, and those students usually are more aware of what my alternative life is. But not a lot of people know, especially at the freshman level. I think they're just kind of caught up in their own world, and I'm just a professor who's part of another. In their eyes, they're kind of parents' world or something. Who knows? And then when they find out, they're like, "What? You know, what is this other double life you got going on?" Type thing. So. I mean, honestly, and I think, you know, I told you sleep is like the most important thing to manage my energy and to not show up tired for a gig, right? Is the number one. I've noticed, you know, in the past, that's when the gig sucked, is if you don't have the energy, right? Even if the tunes are fire, the audience just picks up on that. And then trying to, you know, still be a good dad, being a good professor, being there for my students, that sort of thing. The first thing that goes is grading. I'm like, fuck that grading, you know.
What do your kids know about what you do? And
Uh,
it's not like you're like in the adult film industry, but you like have this like weird alternate life that
yeah,
for,
yeah,
like I'm not you. I bring my kids up. I let them play with the DJ
yeah,
controller.
yeah,
We have a
yeah,
lot of music stuff around the house. What's it like
yeah.
in your house?
My son, grew up. He's 16 now. He grew up listening to all the promos in the car because he would, go with me. I'd drive him to preschool or whatever, and he'd listen to all the music. He had a good music taste. He's got his own kind of. He went through like a lo-fi stage, and then like he's kind of in this indie. I don't even know what it is, what kind of stage it is. He'll listen to like music. I have no clue as to what it is. So he has his own musical taste, but he appreciates what I do and all that sort of thing. But I mean, he doesn't seem too enamored by it. My daughter, I was able to play a community party in Monterey Park, right? It was like all ages, family friendly type event, and so my daughter was finally able to see me DJ, and she was like just so jazzed. And so if she sees me on like looking on Instagram or trying to figure out what video to post or something, she's like, "Oh, there's Daddy, Daddy the DJ." But yeah, she's down with music too. She'll have favorite songs that a 4-year-old, you rinse out a song over and over again, and then she's like, "Oh, now put on Feliz Navidad or put on Elmo or something." I don't know. She picks random songs, but she has good taste. She has good taste too.
She wants that techno track that's got like the Daniel Tiger opening
Right?
or
No,
like or
no. She
Elmo.
loves that John Summit tune. That new one. What is it? Where you are? I don't know what it is. It's a big tune right now. Yeah. Some kind of John Summit tune. She'll be like, she calls it party music. Oh, let's put on party music. And she wants to party and she loves to dance and stuff. So, but yeah, I
And
mean,
then
she's asleep. I
yeah.
put her to bed. The next day I'm there, and it's like, unless I got to travel, she has no idea what just happened that night, kind of thing.
And how many days a year do you end up gigging, and how do you navigate that, or what's your agreement with your wife?
So back in the day, I used to gig probably every weekend, nonstop, just all the time. This is probably before kids type thing. Um, and it would just be as long as as long as we still had our time to go out and do things, and I don't know, the gases in the cars and that sort of stuff. And I'm not like coming home wasted or something. It wasn't too big of a deal. Now it's like, there came a point, because back then when you're first starting out, you're like, yeah, I'll do this gig for $50 or $100 or so. Now she has to kind of be my manager, and it's good leverage for me because I'll be able to tell a promoter, my wife's going to ask how much I'm getting paid. So as long as I'm getting paid a decent amount, she's cool with letting me out of the house. But I make a very conscious effort to make sure I put a lot of attention to the family, and include them in it. It's not like it's this other thing. I don't party as much as I used to, so that's probably a big plus as well. That I'm basically normal the next day, not coming off some acid trip or something. Who knows? Be a different story.
Do you have a specific set time that you aim for, or are you open to anything?
I mean, obviously everyone wants to be the headliner, right? So, but especially like these after hours clubs, there's like this sweet spot that's maybe between 2 and 4, but I've played 4 to close. 3 o'clock seems really nice. 2 o'clock's nice. For a regular club night, 12 to 2 is a great time. That kind of 12 to 2 closing. A lot of times you get an hour, but I love it when promoters give me an hour and a half, 2 hours, get a little more time to breathe and just kind of do your thing. Yeah. Opening's hard, like when you do a festival, because you're not sure how hard to go, like an EDC, Vegas or something like that. Mexico's nice. It opened at 2. There's like, 4 or 5 people before us and then us. So that was a perfect time. I would have preferred just a little bit later because I would like it to be night. It was like right at sunset, but I would like it to be night. Yeah. But yeah.
Night definitely seems like the preferable time. I feel people's imaginations and like the experience they have is significantly different.
Yeah, you're able to let go, I think, that kind of anything to induce that kind of dream state, right? And I imagine this is kind of what filmmakers think about, and writers and artists as well. As if I could just get my audience to just kind of forget themselves for a bit, right? And just kind of give themselves over to the experience. That's the highest kind of form of what I hope I do.
And Chris, in today's culture, creator means a certain specific kind of thing. But there are also, before that, there were people who made things. And for you, you're a writer. You've done a lot of different types of writing. As you mentioned, you've done journalism. That's encompassed cultural criticism, a lot of reviewing of new tracks, which I have to imagine is probably really hard to do, to come up with new and different ways to describe different tracks,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's what you're doing as a musician, DJ. What do you get out of different modes of creation, and what do they bring to you that's different?
I mean, it's going to sound a little hokey or whatever, or what does Tim Ferriss say, like foo-foo or whatever he says. But for me, it goes back to like this kind of shamanistic impulse, in my undergrad days reading Carlos Castaneda or something like that. And just this notion again of the world as a magical place, maybe even trying to capture those kind of magical moments when I first started going out and was just like, what is this? Not just this music, but when you're in a kind of environment with other humans listening to this, and you're just like overwhelmed by the experience or spectacle of it, and something you feel deep in your body, not just sort of intellectually or in your ears or something like that. That's sort of what I was trying to capture. Um, Whether that's a story or not, writing short stories, writing a novel, whatever, working on poetry, writing a music review, in a way they're all kind of explorations of rhythm, but also just being part of this community, this tribe of humans, and trying to sort of connect with them on some level and make them feel something. I think that's what it comes back to for me.
Are you the kind of DJ who is going to go get on the other side of the speakers when a DJ you enjoy is playing? And are you going to dance, or are you going to stand there with a beer?
I will. I'm getting spoiled by always being able to be VIP and backstage, so I'll rarely be up front getting crushed by everybody else. But I will definitely show my appreciation for other people and slap tables, and if I'm in range, be like woo. If it's a club where I can manage my way to the front, I'm the guy up there going yeah, kind of thing. Definitely, try to build other people up as much as possible, especially up and coming DJs and things that I see that are just like, you can just tell they love it, and it's like, give them as much gas as you can to do what they're doing.
And Chris, I remember in the late 90s, I don't remember if you were writing for Herb at the time or not, but it seemed like specifically within drum and bass, like Raymond Roker was the man, right?
Yeah.
And, now, as you said, like you're kind of an elder statesman of this scene. And as you think about what you've done and what's ahead of you, what are like spaces and places where you want to show up? Is there something that you've dreamed about doing as an artist, a gig you'd like to have, somebody you'd like to do a back-to-back with? What do you want to do?
Yeah, and in a weird way, right? People like Raymond Roker, the publisher of Herb, and Pasquale Rotella, the founder of Insomniac and stuff. They're, in a weird way, they're my contemporaries as well, right? And so part of me feels like, oh, I never achieved as much as they did or something in this space. Obviously, I can always go back and look at my PhD on the wall and go, there you go, that was worth it or something. I don't know. It doesn't quite work, but still. So for me, it really is, I think one I would like to get, and starting to get deep into production. Tech House has given me this new life this past year, right? This crew, Just Lick and Dip, that sort of does these after hours. This guy Dylan, who founded that, reached out to me about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and just said, I want you to play one of my parties. I'd never sort of expressed that that this is sort of how I got into the scene. This is where I started with house and techno back in the day. And I was just like, oh man, I'd love to. And it just sort of took off. It's pure. No one really knows who I am. It's just, obviously it's kind of more mainstream than drum and bass. So people show up, the crowds are crazy and that sort of thing. So it's given me a lot of push and confidence. And, I'm, my PhD's done, teaching's becoming a good rhythm. My kids are older now, right? 4 years old isn't the same as having a 2-year-old or something like that. So I really want to produce. some music before this journey's done. Get something out there that's that I can go, okay, I have a legacy that I could leave behind, and not just be a memory like, oh yeah, that dude was a dope DJ back in the day or something, kind of thing. But I definitely don't want to get into throwing parties. So I've tried that, and that's no fun.
Say more about that.
It's a lot of work. I don't know how these guys do, like, respect. Man, every week for decades. Can you imagine? Bringing people out, organizing it, showing up to the club. I can't even go out to the club every week, just for fun. So it's a huge commitment. And the few parties that I have thrown back in the day were just like these huge. I imagine it's the difference between being a screenwriter and a director. There's just like the whole different ball game of trying to be on that side of it, and trying to organize people and logistics and all that sort of stuff. The pleasure for me is really in just performing, I think, and making something out of scratch, really. I think that's where the pleasure comes for me. I'd rather have someone else have the whole infrastructure set up, and I just step into it.
How is what you've done with Tech House in the last year, both in terms of vibe, crowd, music, how does that, I mean, as you said, that's where you started.
Yeah.
But what do you enjoy about that genre and the vibe, and in what way is it different?
I think there you have there's more room to let a song play out. That's number one, right? Vibes are important. That bass line is groovy. I don't know. There's just something about the way in which, if you can craft a good set there, you can get a crowd to really be responsive, even when they're not expecting. In other words, they didn't come to see you because you don't have name recognition like some big DJ, right? But people just go out to have a good time. You'll go out and Pomona, right, on a Tuesday night. I just played this spot called Space Taco, and it's like, holy cow! There's like all these people out on a Tuesday night, just vibing, going crazy. You drum and bass on a Tuesday night would be a hard sell. It's a hard sell, So the music's, a lot of more people are open to it. It does kind of have a more mainstream appeal, that kind of 4 on the floor beat. The elements, I think, the people are able to reference are a little closer to maybe what they're used to consuming, if they consume mainstream radio music or something like that. But yeah, something about it still has a nice power.
Yeah, and you mentioned Charlotte DeWitt. It seems with Charlotte DeWitt, Emily Lenz, and some other artists and DJs in that genre, it's been interesting to see this melding of kind of a minimal tech house sound, almost like hardcore or GABA at the limits of that, and like hard techno, and it's somewhat melodic, and it seems to become really popular globally. Yeah. I personally, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, same. So I think it's at that nice inflection point where I feel I'm not bound to be a purist and play only house or something like that. I can mesh up techno, tech house, some kind of big vocal Chicago style house thing, go into some drop that's like kind of a hard style. Just anything in that 128 to 132 BPM range seems to work for me to just experiment, and the people enjoy it. So it's been fun to sort of figure that out, I guess.
It's fun as long as you can be up to make French toast at 6:30 the next morning.
That's right. No, luckily my wife will let me, if it's a late gig, she'll let me sleep till 10.
That's a great partner. So Chris, thanks so much for joining me today. It's great to reconnect after probably definitely more than a decade.
Right.
We'll need to talk again before another 10 years pass. And in many ways, it feels just like old times. Like we're loading into the Mustang, making sure we don't bottom out over the speed bumps and damage the rims.
Some burritos in downtown, what is that, Valencia or whatever?
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, so thanks for joining me here today. And if people want to check out your music or want to follow you on social media, book you, where should they go?
The best place is, or the most active place is probably Instagram. So at DJ.Nightstalker. I'm on Twitter. I'm on all these, on Facebook and SoundCloud and Mixcloud and that sort of thing as well. But that's probably the main hub right now for me, getting information out about future gigs. And, you could just DM me, or I think there's an option to email me there as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining me, Chris. This has been a blast.
Yeah, it's been a blast. I can't wait to, next time you're in LA, we're going to take you to one of these events.
I'm definitely taking you up on that, and I will be there sometime soon this year. So that'll be a lot of fun, man. Thanks.
Sweet. Yeah. Thank you, brother.
This is Andrew Vontz. Thank you for listening to Choose the Hard Way. Sharing is caring. So if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe wherever you listen. Hit 5 stars, leave a positive review, even a few words helps, and share this episode with a friend. Sign up for the newsletter at choosethehardway.com to get exclusive stories about the hard way, episode updates, and more. Choose the Hard Way is a Big Truck production. It is produced and edited by Anthony Palmer at Palm Tree Podco. Emily Miles provides digital and marketing support. Jeffrey Nebellini is the creative genius behind our brand identity and the Choose the Hard Way logo. The content for this show is created by me, Andrew Vontz.